Hey, welcome back to the Interaxis YouTube channel, interaxis.io. We're going to talk about part 2 of custody. So in the last section, which I know rambled a little bit and went on, we talked about what custody looks like in the traditional finance world. We talked about custody of equity, we talked about custody of debt, and we talked about custody of commodities and just about anything. So a custodian in the traditional finance world is a company, a business, an entity that essentially holds physical assets and keeps track of who holds those physical assets and all the things that come with keeping track, things like exchange, transfer, ownership, distributions, dividends, governance, voting, everything that comes with the ownership of those assets. So in the traditional custodial world, what you've done is you've gone from physical ownership of assets, of stock, of bonds and such, to a digital world where everything is kept track on computers and databases and such. And the custodian has facilitated that. And they facilitated it for purposes of security, efficiency, for the most part. And by doing that, they earn fees. They earn trading charges, such. So they try to build up as many assets as they can so that they can charge more fees. But they're doing it under the auspices, or they're doing it to offer security and efficiency to us as the owners of these physical assets. They've essentially made them digital so that we can easily transact and we can feel secure about them. Now, interestingly enough, as cryptocurrency was released, as Bitcoin came out and all these other cryptocurrencies and soon to be digital assets, security tokens and such have come out, they started in the digital world. They were digital from the beginning. We can transfer Bitcoin or Ether or some other token digitally without the need of a custodian, without the need of a transfer agent or anything. I can see that I have Bitcoin in my wallet, and I can transfer it to Ron's wallet. And we can see that that transaction happened without having to go through a custodian and without having to have any physical asset on me. I don't have to hand anyone shares of Bitcoin. If it's in my software wallet, it gets moved to Ron's software wallet by virtue of the fact that I owned the private keys. Right? So, interestingly, crypto started in this digital space. And so now the idea of having custodians might be going backwards for us. And are we dealing with crypto custodians because we're more comfortable in this physical world right now? We have certain regulations that say certain assets have to be held with a custodian, or in order to get a loan, you have to have your assets held with a registered custodian. We're used to this for security purposes, right? I'm used to having my assets held with a custodian, so when I start holding Bitcoin or Ether or some security token, I feel more comfortable that a custodian with a big name and a lot of money and a lot of insurance is going to hold my assets, even though we in the digital world know they're not actually holding any physical assets. And with that, it's for my ease of mind that I might want to have a crypto custodian. So let's talk about why there are even some of these crypto custodians to begin with, where they even started. Well, you might say, okay, originally, with this digital transfer of crypto assets that started, I could decide I wanted to buy one Bitcoin, and originally I might have to find someone that had some Bitcoin in their wallet, so I somehow online or in person find Ron and I say, okay Ron, I want to buy one Bitcoin, and back in the day Ron says, all right, that one Bitcoin is $50, so I physically give him cash or a check or something like that, and he physically he goes onto his wallet and sends my wallet one Bitcoin. This is a transaction that has taken place essentially without a custodian. I can pay cash, Ron can pay 1 Bitcoin. Of course, this is where we start talking about all the nefarious purposes of Bitcoin, which is for things like Silk Road, when the people were trading drugs and guns and such. You could do it without having to go through a bank or some other type of custodian, because you could send cash for a Bitcoin and then you can exchange Bitcoin electronically without having to go through any sort of custodian once you already have it. Now, this wasn't a big deal because there were so few people in the world that actually wanted to transact or wanted to buy Bitcoin. As the popularity grew, then you had someone like Coinbase come along. And Coinbase said, hey, there's more and more people that want to own Bitcoin. They want to have Bitcoin. So we have to create the rails, right, to connect their bank to the Bitcoin world, right? So Coinbase safely said, okay, now, Adam, if you want to buy Bitcoin, you don't have to find someone else in the world. We have it. We got plenty of Bitcoin here. All you have to do is connect your bank account, send us the $50, and we'll account for the fact that you now have 1 Bitcoin in your wallet. In reality, Coinbase has a huge wallet of Bitcoin, the Coinbase wallet, and all they've done is account for my Bitcoin in there. So in that respect, they're kind of acting as a crypto custodian, right? But what they came out of is an ease of use, because it's not very easy for me to find people with Bitcoin that are willing to take my cash and send me Bitcoin to my wallet. It's much easier for me to find Coinbase and go online and connect my bank account, and then my bank can send Coinbase's bank $50, and Coinbase can say, all right, Adam now owns 1 Bitcoin. So then, if I want to, I can move this Bitcoin out into my own private wallet that I'm going to custody, that I'm going to hold on to, so that I can now interact. Because if we remember, part of the reason why we had custodians in the traditional world is to help us interact. It's much easier to interact in the traditional world if you have a custodian. It's easier for me to send money in the traditional world, in this world. It's easier for me to send money if I can go to my bank account, go online, or send a check through some sort of custodian. It's easier for me to sell stock if I have it with a custodian, because the custodian is going to take care of everything. In the digital world, it's actually just as easy for me to send 1 Bitcoin or 1 Ether if I already have control of my wallet. So sending can be done through self-custody. Okay? All sorts of interaction, which is what we talk about a lot on this YouTube channel and on our website, all the interaction can be done through self-custody. And that's where if we go back to some of our previous videos about decentralized finance, right? Decentralized finance, which is growing so fast right now, this is building the infrastructure so that we now have infrastructure. We now have the ability to make all these transactions, all this interaction, but I can potentially do this with self-custody, because I just attach all my wallets. I just look at what's being held in all my wallets, and if I have the private keys, I can create these interactions and I can create all these transfers, right? So I have my MetaMask wallet, and as long as I have the keys, I go to my MetaMask wallet and I say, I want to start a loan. And I can do that in the digital world very easily. In the physical world, that takes a lot more steps. There's a lot more work to be done. In the digital world, I can already do that. So the question is, what do I need a custodian for? Well, and what are custodians actually going to do? They might hold the private keys. They might keep track of my wallet. So this is Adam's wallet. And what the custodian is going to do is they're going to wrap up my wallet with everyone else's wallet, and on top of this they're going to offer some insurance that says that people can't steal my keys. They're going to offer some services, I'm sure, that are going to be like lending. There's going to be trading involved here. There's going to be portfolio management. Okay, they're going to wrap all these fees, just like they do in the traditional world, around my wallet. But the interesting thing is, there's no physical asset here. This is just a digital representation. This is just digital assets. So what the custodian is doing, again, is providing a lot of the security and a lot of the ease of mind that we're used to, and dealing with a lot of the regulatory issues that we need to deal with, because we've built our regulations and our laws around a physical, traditional asset world. Our regulations and our laws are not ready yet for the digital world. So we're building custodians that are going to hold wallets and wrap a bunch of fees, or wrap a bunch of interactions and transactions and services in there, and they're of course going to charge fees to do this. And we're going to keep doing this because we don't understand yet how to make these transactions on our own, how to self-custody and make these interactions. But what we're going to see, in our estimation, is a blurring of the lines between what is a custodian and what is not a custodian, right? You are going to potentially be able to self-custody, to keep track of all your wallets using some sort of online service, some sort of software, website, app on your phone, whatever it might be. Keep track of your wallets, transact business, keep it secure, get your own insurance, do your own trading, do your own lending, and potentially have other services built on top that you can pick and choose which services you want, and therefore you only pay those fees. That's what we're going to see, but there's going to be a blurring of lines as to what is custody and what is not. Who will accept the fact that I can self-custody and still get a loan, and who will not accept that fact? So that's where we see, I don't want to say that's where we see it going. We're not sure where custody is going to go in the digital and the crypto world, because remember, this traditional custody service that's been built based on physical assets and physical ownership has taken 150 or so years to be built. It's in the developed world, but what we see with crypto and digital assets is they are worldwide, right? So we're not subject necessarily to one country's regulation or one country's security or one country's government. So custodians in the digital world are going to look very different. They're going to offer different services, different fees. For the time being, they're trying to mirror what happens in the physical and in the traditional world, but where they are going and where all these interactions are happening is pushing us more towards the idea of somewhat of self-custody with some sort of security and insurance and services built on top of that. So I know that's very confusing. That was a whole lot of talk about custody in two different videos. Hopefully you'll go back and watch the first one about traditional finance custody, this one more about crypto digital custody and finance, and try to put the two together, and you'll see where it's going when we start talking about wallets and exchanges and different interactions and different transfers we can do within the crypto and digital space, and how that's going to be impacted by what happens in the traditional world. So again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, check us out on interaxis.io, check us out on Twitter @interaxis8, and look forward to seeing you on more videos.